guys, and welcome back. So today we're talking about one of the most famous mushrooms in the world. And if you've spent any time on social media lately, you've probably seen, well, lion's mane everywhere. It is currently in coffees and capsules and powders and gummies. And according to the internet, this mushroom can improve your memory, sharpen your focus, support your mood, protect your nerves, improve your gut, support your immune system, and probably help you finally remember everything you ever forgot. Okay, maybe not the last one, but I think the claims are close to that. But when you see this, it does make you ask questions, right? How did this mushroom become so popular? And more importantly, does the research we're doing actually support all the hypes and claims? Okay, so start at the very easy part, the beginning, right? What is lion's mane? Well, lion's mane, or Hericenones, is one of the easiest mushrooms to recognize, probably not the easiest to pronounce, and it doesn't look anything like mushrooms that you are familiar with, right? There's no little cap. There's no umbrella shape, right? Mice can't go and hide under it like on the cartoons. Instead, it grows in long white tendrils that kind of hang down like icicles off the tree. Some people think it looks like a lion's mane. Some call it pom-pom mushroom. I've also heard people call it monkey head mushroom or hedgehog mushroom. But honestly, I think it looks like somebody hung a white mop from a tree. So we'll call it white mop mushroom. And now that I've said that, you probably won't be able to unsee it. So sorry. Lion's mane grows naturally on hardwood trees throughout North America, Europe, and Asia, and has been used for centuries as both a food and a traditional medicinal mushroom. So the traditional uses, right? Historically, lion's mane wasn't famous because people thought it would make them smarter, okay? Traditional Chinese practices used it to support digestion, vitality, and like overall wellness. In Japan, it became known as Yamabushitake. And in China, it's often called Hotugu, which translates to, well, monkey head mushroom. And that what's interesting is that when you start reading historical references, right, digestion shows up over and over and over again. So we're going to pay attention, right? Because today, most people immediately associate lion's mane with the brain. But historically, the conversation was much broader. People valued it, well, as food, right? They used it to support their digestion. They used it as a general tonic. And it was incorporated into everyday life, right? So where did the brain mushroom reputation come from? Well, this is where modern research enters the conversation, right? Scientists identified two groups of compounds that immediately caught their attention. It's Hericenones and Erinacines. I think that's how you pronounce those. Don't worry, they'll be below in the comment section if anybody wants to dig deeper. And there will also hopefully not be a test on my pronunciations later, but you just need to understand why researchers became interested in them, right? These compounds appear to influence the production of something called nerve growth factor, or you will see it abbreviated to NGF. Think of nerve growth factor as one of the substances involved in growth, maintenance, and survival of the nerve cells. And once researchers started studying that relationship, lion's mane exploded in popularity. Suddenly, everybody wanted the brain mushroom. But here's where marketing starts to get ahead of the science, right? I want us to kind of slow down, right? Because if you spend 10 minutes online, you'll start to see some pretty incredible claims for this little mushroom. It will improve your memory. It will boost your focus. It reverses all your brain fog. It protects your brain. It supports your mood. It improves your sleep. it reduces your anxiety. You might need some after reading all the health claims. The problem isn't that researchers aren't interested in those areas, because they absolutely are. The problem is that many of the strongest findings still come from laboratory studies and animal studies, right, rather than human trials, right? So human studies have shown some promising results, but many of those studies have involved relatively small numbers of participants. And that's the important distinction. Promising doesn't mean necessarily proven, right? Interesting doesn't mean conclusive. Well, we can pay attention to it and we can definitely use them, but don't expect your brain fog to evaporate overnight. So remember how I said traditional use kept going back to digestion? Well, modern research kept poking around, and guess what? It's picking up the traditional parts, because now researchers are also investigating lion's mane and the gut-brain axis. Think about that for a minute, right? We started with a mushroom that's supposedly famous for supporting your brain. And then we went back through history and discovered that traditional practices used it for digestion, right? And now modern research is studying the relationship between the gut and the brain. Apparently, this mushroom has been connecting those dots for a very long time. Yay to us for finally catching up. So, how can you use lion's mane? Well, one of the things I love about this mushroom, right, is that you have options. Because again, not everybody likes to eat them, right? So you can cook them, you can dry it, you can make teas out of it, you can find it in powder form, you can find it already in capsules, you can find it in extracts. I've even seen it in coffee blends. Actually, I have one over there that you sprinkle on top of your coffee. And if you've never cooked with fresh lion's mane before, well, it's interesting to try. The texture is completely different than most mushrooms, right? Some people would compare it to a fish or a crab-like texture, or a lobster. Personally, I think the texture surprises people more than the flavor. To me, it's kind of like shredded beef. But we have to talk about safety because we're not doctors on here. But lion's mane is generally considered safe for most people when used as food. However, remember, supplements are different than food. Concentrated products can cause digestive upset in some people, including nausea, abdominal comfort, headache, or, allergic reactions. So if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, taking prescription medications, or managing a medical condition, as always, before adding anything into our diet that's new, please talk with your healthcare professional, however that person may be. So I think the reason lion's mane has become so popular is that it sits at the intersection of three things, right? Traditional use, scientific research, and modern marketing, right? And honestly, that's exactly why I wanted to include this mushroom in the series, because I don't want you to walk away thinking this mushroom is either a miracle cure or complete nonsense, right? I want you to walk away curious. That's what I hope you do with all of these videos. Curious enough to keep learning. Buy the books, do the research, right? Curious enough to ask the questions, and curious enough to recognize the difference between tradition, research, and the marketing hype. Because somewhere in the middle of those things, right? That's where the real story usually is. Everybody has an agenda, except for the mushroom. So until next time, stay rooted, guys. Stay curious, and as always, keep growing in grace.